Long before the name Iran ever appeared on a modern map, the Persian Empire was already entangled in the destiny of the Jewish people, the Middle East, and, by extension, the entire trajectory of Western civilization. Persia is not just an ancient empire mentioned in passing by historians. It is a civilization that stands at the intersection of biblical prophecy, imperial strategy, and modern geopolitics. What is remarkable is how little this fact is understood outside academic and theological circles. But the truth is that Iran's modern role, its conflicts, its alliances, its worldview, is deeply rooted in a history that began thousands of years ago, in the pages of Scripture and in the architecture of the ancient world. The connection between Persia and the Jewish people begins most famously with Cyrus the Great. In the 6th century BCE, Cyrus did something unprecedented in the history of empires. After conquering Babylon in 539 BCE, he issued an edict allowing the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The book of Isaiah not only mentions Cyrus, but goes as far as to call him the Lord's anointed, the same Hebrew word used for messiahs, despite the fact that Cyrus was a Gentile, a pagan king by Jewish standards. This is a staggering theological statement. It shows that the God of Israel is not confined to the borders of Israel, but operates through the mechanisms of global empires. From that moment on, the relationship between the Jewish world and Persia became one of the most complex and consequential in human history. Persia became the safe haven where Jewish culture, scholarship, and religious life thrived in exile. Even after the temple was rebuilt, vast numbers of Jews chose to remain in Persia, where communities flourished for over 2,500 years. That diaspora became one of the oldest continuous Jewish communities outside the land of Israel, until it was mostly displaced following the rise of modern Iran's Islamic Republic. But here is where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Modern Iran is not merely the geopolitical successor of ancient Persia by accident. It is the product of an unbroken civilizational consciousness, a worldview that stretches from Zoroastrian Persia to the Islamic Republic. This is a civilization that has never fully accepted the legitimacy of Western hegemony, Arab domination, or Jewish sovereignty in the Middle East. Understanding that requires stepping into the mind of Persia, both ancient and modern. To the ancient Persians, empire was not simply a project of conquest, it was a civilizational mission. The Persian model of governance was built on a duality, centralized imperial authority, combined with remarkable local autonomy. That's why Cyrus could allow Jews to rebuild their temple, while simultaneously commanding vast territories from the Indus to the Aegean. Empire, for Persia, was about stewardship of the world under divine order. In Zoroastrianism, the cosmic battle between light and darkness was mirrored in the political duty of the king to uphold order against chaos. This theological political framework survived the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, the conquests of Alexander the Great, the rise of Islam, and continues in a transformed way under the modern Shiite clerical regime. Today's Iran is the heir to this legacy. The Islamic Republic views itself not simply as a nation-state, but as the protector of a sacred order against what it perceives as chaos, whether that chaos is defined as Western secularism, Sunni Arab hegemony, or Zionism. This is not merely propaganda, it is an operating philosophy that guides Iran's foreign policy, military strategy, and ideological exportation across the region. Iran's enmity with Israel, therefore, is not incidental. It is the product of two civilizational narratives colliding. From the Israeli perspective, the return to the land after 2,000 years is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, a restoration of divine covenant, sovereignty, and purpose. From Iran's perspective, this is an aberration, a disruption of the Islamic and regional order that emerged after the destruction of the Second Temple and the exile of the Jews. In the Shiite narrative, particularly, there is an eschatological expectation, the return of the Mahdi, the messianic figure who will usher in an era of justice. The elimination of Israel is often framed within that apocalyptic vision, not merely as a political objective, but as part of a cosmic realignment. What makes this even more fascinating is that the prophetic literature of the Hebrew Bible anticipates Persia's role not only in the past, but in the future. The book of Daniel, written during the Persian period, speaks of successive empires, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, each playing a role in a divine timetable that culminates in the final redemption. The prophet Ezekiel mentions Persia explicitly as one of the nations involved in the great apocalyptic war known as Gog and Magog. Whether one reads this literally or allegorically, the presence of Persia in eschatological scenarios is undeniable. This is not lost on Iran's leadership, nor on Israel's strategists. When Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon, arms Hamas in Gaza, supports militias in Syria and Iraq, and develops its nuclear program, it does so within a framework that blends modern power politics with ancient civilizational memory. Similarly, when Israel engages in clandestine operations, sabotage, assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists, and cyber warfare, it does so with the full awareness that this is not merely a contest of nations, but a struggle between civilizational destinies. Yet the paradox remains. Iran was once the greatest benefactor of the Jewish people. The same land that gave them refuge, that allowed them to return to Zion, that sheltered one of the largest Jewish diasporas, is now committed to their political annihilation. How does a civilization move from protector to adversary? Part of the answer lies in the transition from Zoroastrian Persia to Islamic Iran. The Arab conquest of Persia in the 7th century transformed not just the religion, but the entire ideological framework of the region. Yet, Persia never fully Arabized. Unlike Egypt or Syria, Iran retained its language, its sense of separateness, and its imperial memory. Shiite Islam itself, adopted later by Persia, reflects this outsider status within the broader Islamic world. Shi'ism is a theology of the marginalized, the party of Ali, the minority against the Sunni majority, the narrative of betrayal and suffering. This resonates deeply with Iran's national story. A great empire humiliated by Arab conquerors, Mongol invasions, Western imperialism, and now, in its own eyes, by American and Israeli dominance. Iran's nuclear ambition cannot be understood merely as a quest for power. It is a civilizational statement. To possess nuclear weapons is, in Iran's calculus, to reclaim its historical status as a great power, immune to domination, capable of projecting its vision for the region and perhaps the world. It is not accidental that Iran pairs its nuclear program with theological justifications, fatwas, eschatological rhetoric, and narratives of resistance. But there's another layer, often ignored in Western analysis. Iran's relationship with Judaism is complex, even today. Despite the rhetoric against Israel, Iran maintains the largest Jewish population in the Middle East outside of Israel itself. Synagogues operate in Tehran. Jewish schools exist. The regime distinguishes between Jews and Zionists, a rhetorical but nonetheless meaningful distinction in Iranian discourse. This is a civilizational memory that refuses to completely erase the ancient bond between Persia and the Jewish people, even as the political relationship deteriorates. At the core of this dynamic lies a theological question. Can two civilizations that both see themselves as chosen, one by the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the other by the cosmic mission of resisting injustice and ushering in the Mahdi, coexist in the same geopolitical space? History suggests that coexistence is possible but unstable. It was possible under Cyrus. It was possible under Persian kings who allowed Jewish flourishing. But it may be impossible when both sides frame the conflict not merely in terms of borders and security, but in terms of destiny. This is why every negotiation over Iran's nuclear program is not just a technical discussion about uranium enrichment, but a spiritual and civilizational confrontation. This is why every Israeli airstrike in Syria, every assassination in Tehran, every cyber attack carries the weight not only of tactical warfare, but of millennia of intertwined history. And yet, embedded in this confrontation is a strange mirror. Iran and Israel are, in some sense, reflections of each other. Both are civilizations that survived the collapse of great empires. Both are nations whose identities are inseparable from their religious narratives. Both believe they have a mission beyond mere survival, to be a light unto nations, to resist the forces of injustice, to preserve a sacred way of life against the corrosions of modernity, secularism, and imperialism. Perhaps this is why the conflict is so intractable. It is not a clash between oppressor and victim, but between two civilizations that both refuse to be swallowed by the tides of history. As the world watches the tension escalate, whether through proxy wars in Lebanon and Syria, clandestine operations, or the looming specter of nuclear confrontation, few understand that this is not merely a political dispute. It is the unfolding of a drama that began over 2,500 years ago, when a Persian king freed an exiled people and set into motion a prophetic timeline whose end has not yet arrived. The story of Persia and Israel is not over. It never really ended. It simply changed forms, from Babylon to Jerusalem, from Tehran to Tel Aviv, from the scrolls of Isaiah to the headlines of today, and perhaps from prophecy to destiny.